NERDSoul.
All right, so let's bring up our panel. Let's start with our Superman himself. You know him from the Harry Potter movies. Why is Bruce looking around like he's not here? Okay, there he is. You know him from the Harry Potter movies, from Star Trek, Discovery, from so many other great films and TV series, Jason Isaacs! And athletic. You know what? You can pick wherever you want. You're the first one up. Diedrich, have you gotten here yet? Oh! You know him from American Housewife, where he just got here from. Got waylaid on set. The Drew Carey Show, Veep. You name it. Batman the Brave and the Bold. There he is. Our Lex Luthor, Diedrich Bader. You know her from Angel. You know her from Person of Interest. From The Gifted. Let's say hi to our Lois Lane for this evening, Amy Acker. Any Star Wars Rebel? Oh, we're going to be sharing those microphones. So notice the guys grab the microphone.
10 o'clock by the time you bring all of us up with this introduction.
Any Young Justice fans? Star Wars Rebels fans? How about Vanessa Marshall, our Wonder Woman? Batman Ninja, you guys watch that? Yeah. The Batman from that, as well as from Batman Arkham Origins, I can speak. Roger Craig Smith. All the way in the back. Filming some kind of astrology, I'm sure. Astronomy. Okay. Dueling Batmans, I like it. This will be like the Batman 80 panel again. This will be fun. Where's Kevin? How about Grimm? Anybody a Grimm fan? Really? Was that all I got? I love Grimm. I never missed a damn episode. Friday nights, man. The captain is here. Say hi to Sasha Roiz. Hal Jordan. Okay, critters. Any Critical Role people in this room? We got Travis Willingham here. He's Superior Man. Nobody uses the stairs. Don't you know comics people are klotzes? Watch. Producer and director, you've seen all of his movies, because if you're here, I know you have. Say hi to Sam Liu. Come on up. You have those two choices. Oh, he sacrifices because the architect of modern superhero animation and Johnny Quest's clone is here, Bruce Timm! While Bruce is coming up, we got a couple of people we do have to welcome. One of the original members of the production team that created this great graphic novel comic story, Dave Johnson, is here in the audience. Our casting and dialogue director, the guy that told all these people how to say the words, Wes Gleason. And the man responsible for that incredible score, Freddie Weidman, is out here somewhere. Way back there. Oh, and there's a couple of really good geeks in the audience. Any Legion of Superheroes animated fans here? We got Yuri Lowenthal sitting in the audience. Superman from there. And if you like Gotham or 12 Monkeys, he brought his date Todd Stashwick this evening. You know how you guys all send in emails to James Olsen? So do those guys. All right, I dropped all my cards, so I don't know what I'm asking. Oh,
Hey, Gary.
Patrick Daly. Patrick Daly still here? That man came all the way from Kansas for this.
Hey, Gary, are there any special features on this Red Sun thing? Like any other cartoons or anything, maybe? Like something that maybe Roger Craig Smith might be in? Oh, sorry, did I steal your thunder? Sorry.
No, but I don't have the press release with me, so I can't say it right off the bat. But if you go to your favorite local website, your favorite fan site, you'll see everything that is involved in this film. All the good. What are you talking about?
The Phantom Stranger short?
Very good point. We have a short called The Phantom Stranger. You guys are brutally aware of this, correct? The Phantom Stranger with Peter Serafinowicz as the Phantom Stranger himself and Michael Rosenbaum as Seth, the bad guy. I thought you meant all the other.
Oh, there's some other good groovy stuff.
There's some
too.
really good stuff.
There's free membership to the American Communist site, I think.
So this story was fascinating when it was published, and it's kind of timely today. Did you do any tweaking to the story to continue the relevance?
Not really. I mean, it's, it's weirdly, I think Jason and I were talking about this backstage, it's not, strangely, it's not that political a story. I mean, it is, but it's not, I don't think there's anything really kind of super pertinent to what's going on here, and if there had been something in the comic that did kind of, line up with what's going on right now in the world, maybe we would have leaned into it, but we didn't want to add anything to that. So, I mean, I certainly know how I'm going to vote in November, and if I thought that it would move the needle any way towards that direction, maybe I would have done it, but I don't think it would have anyhow, so.
My mind is a whirl with the possibilities. What made James DeMatteis the right guy to write this story? You worked with him enough?
Yeah, he's a terrific guy. We worked with him for many, many years. I mean, he wrote a lot of some of our best stuff on Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, and specifically on adapting like tricky stories. Like he's the guy who adapted For the Man Who Has Everything for us, based on the famous Alan Moore story. So we thought he would be just the guy for this.
Two Elseworlds. I had a list when I was a kid. 2 Elseworlds stories in 2 years. Gotham by Gaslight, and now Red Sun. What are the intricacies of bringing an Elseworlds story to animation? Thank you, Sam Liu. And you got any favorites you'd like to see made someday?
The 2 Elseworlds books that jump out at me for like just being really crazy and weird that I would like to do. There's a Superman one called Speeding Bullets, which is kind of like a 40s noir crime version of Superman. And then there's a really strange Batman one called the Doom That Came to Gotham that Mike Millar wrote. So I would love to take a crack at that one. How about you, Sam? Anything?
It's funny because the Doom That Came to Gotham, I actually asked Mike Carlin for the graphic novel because I'm really into that sort of Cthulhu type. I love that stuff. So.
Sam, tell us your life story.
Well, I was born. Nobody wants to hear it.
For those of you on the panel who were familiar with the story before you got the role, what were your? Is there anyone who was familiar with the story before you got the role?
This is the geekiest room I've ever been in my life, and I'm in Star Wars and Harry Potter. This is, I'm Star Trek. I mean, I am so out geeked. Did anybody know?
Yeah, my son is a comic book fan, and so he's the one who turned me on to this story many years ago, saying that it was super cool. He basically just told me the story, though, and I never read it, and I never read the script either, so this to me was a big surprise, and it was a really great story. I loved the feminist bit to it, too. I thought it was very cool.
Well, that kind of leads into my second half of that question is, each of you is taking on an iconic role, but it is an Elseworlds tale. It's not the Batman we know. It's not the Wonder Woman we come to expect all the time. Were you thrown a little when you first read the script? Did it change the way you wanted to approach the character? Diedrich wants Amy to answer. Roger's up.
Well, I've played Wonder Woman 2 other times. As far as the DC films go, of course, Justice League, Crisis on Two Earths, and then Flashpoint Paradox. And Crisis on Two Earths, she was sort of what one would expect, pretty phenomenally. And then Flashpoint Paradox, she was obviously the opposite of what one might expect. Ask Aquaman. Then in this one, it makes so much sense that she says half the things that she said, but she's never really been given the mic, as it were, to sort of give voice to, telling a man to figure it out, etc. So I thought that was really interesting, and it was very well directed by Wes Gleason. Thank you, Wes. So that moment was just sort of, it came and went, and it was immaterial to a certain extent, and I did not expect to see that on the script, but it was fun to bring it to life.
Women, am I right?
Diedrich and Jason, you two are traditionally cast as a villain and a good guy or a geek. You don't get the opposite roles, and in this case, you got sort of the opposite roles. What was that like for you, and how hard is it to work against the typecasting you two usually get?
It was interesting for me to be cast in this. I was extremely grateful, every part has a different challenge. This one, he's kind of the bad guy, but he ultimately ends up being the good guy. It's so morally complex. For the medium, which has always been underestimated, it is an incredibly complicated story, and there's no clear, good guy or bad guy in it. And I thought that was really cool the way that was handled. There's no black and white, and there so often is in this world, but in this alternate universe, which is closer to our own, oddly enough, there's only gray. And there's moral choices that you make along the way, and I thought that was extremely well handled.
Yeah, the really corny answer is that when on screen, no, I want to look at you, Gary. I'm sorry, I don't want to look at them. I'm looking at you. On screen, most of those parts that are thought of as bad guys, the only decent ones are the ones that are three-dimensional and complex, because you only really hate them or are scared of them if you recognize them as human beings, and so they're. The most high-profile one being in Harry Potter, he's a racist, and he's trying to make Hogwarts great again, and he's scared of. He is though. He's scared of the present because he looks back to a time that people like him rule the world, and they don't anymore. He'd like to turn the clock back, but he's a coward. He's a bullying coward, and he seems like a human being to me. And this, I don't know that. As Diedrich said, I don't think any of them, but what's great about it, I don't know if it's grey, because grey sounds muddy to me, but I think what it is there are no perfect solutions. So it's funny, one of the members of the people who are interviewing us outside asked me what it's like to play Superman as a bad guy. But he lands in Russia, and he's the same Superman we've always known. He's a guy who is absolutely obsessed with, or concerned with, dedicated to fairness and justice and truth. He sees it through the prism of the world he's growing up in and he's exposed to, which is a system designed to try and be completely fair. Just the system doesn't quite work, and there are things that are kept from him until they're brought in front of his face, and I would say that's probably similar to every system. And so, what I loved about this, I slightly disagree about. It's interesting we had the conversation, but I took something entirely different about it. It's not political with a giant P. I think it's incredibly political with a small p, because at this time in this country, in my country too, people have dug themselves into positions, entrenched themselves into positions, and even in the face of evidence that should make them go, wait a second, how can I be so absolutely adamant and sure that I'm right, because that's true and this isn't happening. But it's too late, because they've kind of built this wall around themselves and defined themselves. And that's what I love about this story. I don't make it sound like a message. It's you've just seen it's a great piece of entertainment, but it's, you've got a presidential election coming up here, and I don't know what anyone else thinks, but it seems to me there are no perfect people to be in the White House. The person who's there at the moment, I would say, is maybe slightly less than perfect, and maybe none of the candidates who are looking to replace him are perfect. But here we have Superman, who is in many ways the perfect human being, the most ethical, moral superhero that's ever been dreamt up. And even he, given absolute power, doesn't have a fucking clue what to do. He's not sure. He's not sure which way is the right way to run the world, and any decision he makes has some dire consequences. And that's one of the things I loved about this script. I thought it reflected back exactly the world we live in, where there are no perfect solutions, but you better find the best imperfect solution and try and do it with some compassion. I have no idea what the question was.
Well, you answered it perfectly. Amy, there have been a great number of...
Thanks for that very mild ripple of applause.
There have been a number of very well recognized performances of Lois Lane, both on live action and in animation. Did any of that influence you, or how did you choose to approach this Lois Lane?
Yeah, I mean, I think growing up as like a child of the 80s, I had a very specific Lois Lane in mind of who Lois Lane is, and I was saying even before I wanted to be an actor, I wanted to be Lois Lane. Like, she was who you wanted to be when you grew up. So I was really excited to get to play the part, and then I read the script and I was very confused because I was like, no, wait, why is she with Lex Luthor? This is wrong. And but so as I continued reading and realized maybe he's not the bad guy, maybe she is still some of the same person. She still holds these beliefs. She still asks the hard questions and wants good answers and fights for what she thinks is right. And so I, again, forgot the question. But yes. But
What was your influence?
The question was, why hasn't Lex Luthor come up with some way to stop balding, given that he's such a genius?
Several of you had particularly physical performances, Travis most notably. Are you just an absolute wreck in the booth at that point? I mean, what's going on there? Are you beating up the microphone and yourself?
Yeah, lots of sweat. Lots of sweat drenching through the shirt and the underarms, change of clothes, and then Wes just, of course, asks you to do it naked, which gives you the most real performance. It's all about, removing the layers. Is that not what you guys do in the...
Only at the audition.
No, it's great. It's great fun, especially in the ADR sessions where the animations come back and you get to chase picture. It just lifts the performance that much more. You get to see them just absolutely hammering away at each other, and so you're inspired to just give it all you got.
You saved most of that for the ADR then?
I mean, you do a little bit beforehand, but it's also just whatever you come up with in your mind, whatever's from whatever is there in the script. But what actually comes back when they've animated it is just so much more, and it's nice to match that picture and drive it home. Seeing Superior Man all bizarroed out, if you will, and having arms one size larger than the other, that kind of changes the vocal performance as well. So it lends to it.
Hand a microphone down to Roger and Sasha there. Oh, good. Roger, for starters with you. You've voiced Batman in a couple of interesting incarnations. How did this experience differ for you?
This is easily the most unique. I mean, obviously with the accent, but this was my exposure to the Elseworld world. And very quickly, I was like, this whole 10 seconds thing, those people didn't leave that building, did they? That's not a Batman I'm familiar with. It was like, yeah, sorry. So, I mean, I've answered a couple questions when we were doing the press for this about the similarities between the character that I've already played in the past and this one, and I still think this is what this film does so great, is the perspective shift of things to where you can understand that it's like, this is still a version of Batman that we know, in terms of he feels that what he's doing is correct and right, which arguably almost all the characters do. And he's got similar motivations to things that have kind of motivated him to do what he's done in other iterations of Batman that we're familiar with. And so in one way, I mean, other than the weird breaking of his policy, is still kind of a similar Batman to what we know, just with a desperate attempt at a Russian accent. So.
We'll start at Sasha's end, and you can pick your own. But did you have a favorite scene in the film?
Favorite scene in the film?
Favorite scene in the film. Something appealed to you most.
I mean, I'm blanking, of course, right now. Because, of course, when you would ask me a question, nothing would come to mind. However, I did love the film. I just want to talk about the film as a whole because it's kind of funny. I think I'm the only one who actually speaks Russian on this panel. Coincidentally, that was my heritage. I mean, my father was born. That title credit, like 1946 Soviet Union. My father was born in 1946 in the Soviet Union. So that was a very interesting moment right at the outset of the film. But no, the whole thing for me just kind of spoke on several levels, obviously professionally and just as a fan of, genre and stuff, but personally, because I was raised kind of, in the shadow of all of this. My parents fled that part of the world and subsequently, taught me sort of some of the horrors of it. And but again, watching it, it's a perspective, right? It depends who's telling the history, who's telling the story. That'll obviously always dictate who the hero is, and that really resonated with me on many, many levels. So I just turned the question to something I really wanted to answer.
Yeah. Had a way.
That's how you do it.
That's PR 101. I like it. Anybody else have a favorite scene, or should we let the fans abuse you?
I will say my absolute favorite scene is when Superior Man calls out Superman and yells, "Superman!" Like, it was flawless. I love that moment. That was badass.
I have to say, I thought this whole thing was exceptionally well directed animation. And one of the things that I really love and miss in a lot of American animation, but they use it in, let's say, Princess Mononoke, for example, are moments of silence. I really did not expect that. The moment with the Chinese ambassador, for example, when they're just looking at each other, and he asks him a direct question, and he takes his time. And it's really beautiful because it makes you think. And so often animation just comes at you over and over and over again. That said, the action sequences were amazing, but the pauses, I thought, were just fabulous because it did reinforce this idea of which way are you going to go. There's choices that you have to make in your life. And when Superman and Wonder Woman were speaking, the quiet just really spoke to me. It was, I thought, beautifully directed in that way. So that's all I want to say.
I think my favorite scene, if that's the question, I liked when Wonder Woman came down and split everybody up and laid it all out, and it was really badass.
I should say before, so I said you, Sam, that I liked, akin to the pauses and the silence, giving it the space, I like the fact that a lot of the scenes don't end on a kind of button end line and cut to. They end like moments do with a bit of contemplation or someone having to go away and think about something. And people don't have the kind of great snappy comeback because they're slightly thrown by what's just been said to them. And it's just rare to find sophisticated adult storytelling that's also entertaining on this in this world. That's why it's so refreshing.
Well, I love the music all the way through, and it's...
There you go, Freddie.
Yeah. Well done, bravo. You're a genius. That was amazing. Because, having read the comic book, that's sort of one version. Then having read the script by myself, that's another version. Then to have interacted and, then to see it with sound altogether. So I would say that is sort of my favorite overall thing. But the very moment that took my breath away was when Superman is saving the world. And there's that callback to Svetlana's line, and then the light flash, and then silence. I thought that was an elegant use of silence in contrast to the music right there. It really punctuated that sacrifice. So.
Yeah. So the music was great, but best of all when it was switched off.
There you go, Freddie.
It made the silence more powerful, and it the absence of sound, there was room for emotion in there. Much like you said, that the beats of silence were full of emotion as well.
A scene that stuck out to me was when Superman pulled Svetlana and the other people out of the mines or wherever they were, and he knelt in front of the sunset. I almost inferred that he could hear her heartbeat slowing down. I don't know, maybe that just was my interpretation of it, and he just knew that like there wasn't anywhere to go, just take this moment, give her this sunset, and he just listened to her go quietly. And the way that they animated his expression just really touched me. It was, you really saw the hurt there, and I don't think I've seen that on Superman in that way before, so that really impacted me in a way that sort of surprised me. That's any scene that Roger's in is also my favorite.
Can I change my answer to the silence?
Obviously, I'm biased because we work so closely with all of these. I'm going to change my thing to my answer to giving all the voice actors praise, actually, because.
That's once.
I don't know, there's just so much to this because the source material itself is so juicy, but there's so many, I feel like, moments that feel like real moments, that people kind of go through. And decisions that people, to a smaller degree, obviously, but similar, I feel like they so there's an honesty, I feel like, to a lot of it. And so, and as Wes knows, and, who I've worked with for a long time, I sweat, like details of performance. And, like Travis's section, right, was just basically, like, you think that his Superior Man is just about fighting, but there's a nuance to, even, without picture, like, Bruce and I, we talked about, right, like when he was breaking down just the sort of stuttering in his voice, it gave us chills. So it's not just, there's an investment, I feel like, with all of you guys. And there was, as somebody that's basically taking sounds and trying to match a picture to the sound, and looking sometimes to, the vocal performance, what's being, the word that's being said, the potential emotion that's behind it. You guys all gave us something really, clear to grasp onto and to sort of, shine up and pick out. Again, there's just so many great, I feel like, moments. One of the things I got to give Bruce also, just the speech at the end. Bruce rewrote it, and but it made me think of, because your wife is your Marta, right? And I was just thinking of like, wow, Marta must love you because you wrote such a beautiful sort of, it's the thing of like the retirement thing of, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll, go to a beach or and cure the common cold, or be with the most beautiful woman. This is him rewriting it, like sort of the day before. So I just felt like it was so personal, and it was just really beautiful, So.
I don't have a single scene. There's so many good scenes. I love the scene in the limo between Luthor and Lois. I love that he's kind of being a dick, and then she gives him this wonderful present that's like perfect. And I love Diedrich's little quiet little perfect taste as always. It was so good, There's just tons of little moments like that throughout the whole thing. I'm glad somebody, I guess Vanessa mentioned the silent explosion at the end. Sam had already we had already kind of talked about that we were going to do it silent, and then our sound effects guy put a sound effect on that. We forgot to tell him, don't put a sound effect on that, and he came up with a really, really good sound effect for the explosion, and we're like, that's awesome, but we're going to do it silent. So there's tons of stuff. Sam and I are both huge Svetlana fans. I think she's like the star of the movie for me. Like that scene in the very beginning when she's chasing after the bullies and she beats that one guy up and throws a rock at his head. It's like, yeah, she's my hero. So yeah.
All right, we got a couple minutes for some questions. State your name when I call you on you, and we'll go with this fella right here.
Hi, my name is Ilya. Nice to meet concern was like, okay, here we go. We're gonna have a very cheesy Russian accent. But you guys did a flawless job. You didn't make it sound like it was overacted James Bond Russian villain. It was an authentic Russian accent. And I was just kind of curious in your own experience and what you went through. What did you do to kind of like really learn it and flesh it out and really take it apart and put it in your character, especially for both you guys?
Thanks. Could you all hear that, by the way? Yeah. Good. Okay, cool. Thanks for that. Actually, so I played a Russian in a film called Hotel Mumbai that was out last year, and I researched it a fair old bit. And the truth is that an authentic Russian accent for someone who's not spent lots of time outside Russia does sound like a James Bond villain. The problem is the real Russian accent sounds just like that. It sounds corny. But there's two things going on here. One, I didn't want to do that because he's still Superman. You have to be able to engage with him and find out what he cares about when he's upset and relate to him. And secondly, he's speaking his first language. These characters who are speaking Russian, who are Russian, are speaking their first language to each other. As soon as you speak with a thick accent, the message you're sending to the audience is this is not their first language, they're translating there. So luckily there's a bunch of Russian expats all over the world. Russia has a giant diaspora now. And I found a bunch of source material that I looked at for Hotel Mumbai. There's reality shows of Russians in London, Russians in America. And there was a guy I found on YouTube, and I had his voice in my head. And he sounded to me like it was a lightly touched in accent, enough to remind you where it was from, but not so much that it brought all the baggage with it. That's what I know. What are you?
You can hear me, right?
For me, it was Rounders with John Malkovich and Piedet men his money, just all day long, over and over and over again. No, I have a dialect coach, a woman by the name of Paula Glott, and I believe she's got a new, really hard to pronounce last name. She's been married, and she is like, she will forget more about dialects than we will all ever hope to learn. And I came in fully prepared to do a very, very thick Russian accent, and this is where the collaborative process of working with everybody on the other side of the glass, Wes and Bruce and Sam and everybody telling me, hey, we're going to do it like this, or not so much there, and so that it doesn't kind of jar. So it's a big collaborative thing, but dialect coach, and then again, Piedet me and his money. It's just over, and Oreo cookies. No, I don't know.
Thank you.
Expecting you to do actually like Russian transcripts almost in Russian, especially scenes in Russia talking to each other.
By the way, you're talking about being collaborative. You know that we don't ever record with each other. It's one of the odd things about animation. There's these group scenes, and it's a tribute to everybody who put it together, Wes and everybody else, that it sounds like we were ever in a scene together, because I was in England most of the time, recording it on open line.
Next. How about right here?
Speak super loud so there's people right at the back.
Name's Tim. Nice to meet you guys. You guys did a amazing job. Super awesome. This is definitely aimed at whoever was involved in the writing. This is not a complaint. I think just having read this book, I'm proud to ask. Why no twisting?
The twisting. Oh, the ending from the comic. That crazy jump start into the future thing. It's mostly practical. It's a fascinating ending. Here's the thing, I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't read the comic. You should absolutely go read it, because it's great. But the ending was just kind of a production nightmare. It's like having to design like 3 futuristic stages of humanity going off into the far future would be just kind of like way beyond our means to be able to do on the time and budget that we had to work with. And we did discuss it a little bit just in terms of, again, I don't want to spoil it, but we did talk about it, but it was just kind of like, yeah, we'll stick with this, because it's just.
Obviously, it worked obviously well either way. So like that was no complaint there. But just like that.
Thank you, Tim. How about, Sam's got, Sam's?
I'll try to keep this short, but for me, right, one of the things that, I don't know, I'm a big sort of like flow person. I feel like the ending of the movie needed to be about Superman. And so I felt like the twist was about a twist that was about a thing that sort of made it finite, because it was a thing that sort of, it basically, to me anyway, when I read it, there was no alternate solution. It's this, it goes to this, and that's what he says. And so it's a finite movie. And I kind of felt like, okay, that's tricky, and that's a great fun, sort of fun, clever thing, but emotionally, I don't think it does anything. You know what I mean? It's just clever for clever's sake kind of thing. You know, I kind of felt like even in the end, there was a different line for then the Svetlana sort of coming back to him.
Yeah,
And it was because of how the cleverness of Luthor. But I again, like we've had a discussion. I was just like, it's got to be about Superman, and we got to close him as a character. You know, it's like he returns to basically his, you know, his innocence again. You know,
And nobody recognizes him in that hat, which is awesome.
Thank you, Tim. All right, Yuri.
Short question. My name is Yuri. Jason, how many films are you how many films are you going to kill Stalin in?
Many as I can.
Had to go for the humor there. Get somebody way in. All right, right there in the middle.
All right. Hey guys, my name is Sam. Thought you all did fantastic performances. Excellent chemistry between everyone in the cast. Loved it. Now,
Who was best? No, sorry, go.
Okay, so here's my question, and Jason, this is for all the actors, everyone. You guys did great too. Love you, Christian. But if you had a character, you played a dozen characters before. If you had a character to do over again, just for the sake of, I could have probably done that better. Who would they be and why?
You mean if we were to switch characters, or?
Oh, no. Oh, just
Throughout our entire career, which part will we do again?
Yeah. Diedrich, he's asking about Office Space, by the way.
Oddly enough, I had a different character for Lawrence before walking in. I had just seen Bottle Rocket, which is an absolute masterpiece if you've never seen it. Anyway, I can't do it now, but I had worked up a whole Owen Wilson impression for Lawrence, because I was like, well, they're going to shoot in Austin, and he's from Austin, and that's going to be really cool. So I signed in, and I sat down, and Owen Wilson walked out. So I checked the sheet, which I did not look to see who else was signing in, but he was reading for Lawrence. So I had to come up with an entirely different character, because I couldn't do a better Owen Wilson. Between the sign-in sheet and the the room. So that's what I came up with. No, I told you. But I thought every performance was really fantastic, and it's really interesting what Jason has said, because it does rely so heavily on these guys to get the same tone all the way through, and have a commitment to the scenes to not overplay them. We could have been much more cartoony, but the threats were real, the consequences were real, and the choices felt like they had great import. And I was particularly struck by that.
Anybody else, or we?
I can speak for everyone when I say we would play differently all the parts in series we've been in, which have been cancelled.
All right. How about right there?
Next, question for Sam and Bruce. I just want to talk about the DC showcases. I'm a huge fan of the showcases, and I'm so happy you guys brought it back. That was the last one, man. Phenomenal. Process of deciding what to do for stories.
We basically we meet with the DC guys like every week basically, and have like just kind of a roundtable discussion. But we talk about things that are currently in production, where they're at, and kind of looking down the road. It's like, oh, what else would we be interested in doing? So when the idea of bringing back the DC Showcase shorts came up, it basically came down to, well, what characters would me and Butch and Sam be interested in doing? And we basically just kind of like said, oh, well, I'd be into this character, and Sam immediately went to, I want to do Death! And, I've always loved the Phantom Stranger ever since I was a little kid. It was like literally one of the first comics that turned me into a comic book fan. So it's really just, it's about that. It's kind of like, oh, I've always liked that character. I think I could do an interesting story here with this, and, it's kind of just fun. It's like, it's kind of a breeze. I mean, it's work as well, obviously, but Sam sweat bullets over his short. I could tell you stories, which I won't. Yeah, so it's just kind of like it's just us, exercising our inner geeks. Sam, you got anything to say about it?
No, I mean that's pretty much it. I mean it's weird too because so much of it is some of it's timing. Like I was fortunate enough that I feel like even though like James and Bruce maybe are fans of like Neil Gaiman stuff, I don't know if they love it per se. You know what I mean? It's like there's things that they love that I don't love it, but I liked it. But Death I loved, or the whole Neil Gaiman Sandman thing. That's I don't know, just when I started my career, that was the thing that I wanted to do, and apparently it was on the table for a little while, right? Because you guys were just kind of like, I don't know if I could do something with it. But I was just like, are you guys crazy? Like, give it to me, So, so sometimes it's luck and it's timing and it's things like that, So.
We have time for one or two more questions. All right, all the way in the back. Okay, you, the one waving her hand. Yes.
Sorry. Hi. I just had a question for the actors. As an actor myself, just starting out, what kind of advice can you give to an actor just starting out in the industry?
I'd say this very quickly. If you've got a smartphone, you own the whole studio, and don't wait for someone to hire you. I hope will happen to you. Who knows what path you take there? But make things not to make money. Make things just to make things, and practice and edit. You can score. You can VFX on iMovie. You can broadcast it. You can even make money. And you can find other people to make them with, and you'll end up, whatever happens to you, getting more satisfaction out of anything you make than anything you're in that someone else made.
All right. Oh, the man with the Green Lantern thing there.
Do you say shirt or green?
No, the recharger. Yeah,
You guys got to fight it out.
He brought a prop. He gets to ask a question.
I was lost outside and she helped us get here.
Yeah, we made it. Yes.
She drives Uber on the way home if you need help.
I mean, he is holding a Green Lantern. I've got a slight advantage here.
We didn't get a lot of time with Hal, so I'm curious your kind of take on Hal. I mean, clearly he's a guy without fear. He was ready to go against Superman and was slowly taking over the world. So I just kind of wanted to get a little bit of your perspective of what interested you in the character, and did you think he had balls the size of the ones he had on the screen to go against Superman?
First of all, I'm very grateful to be a part of this. So this is a relatively new world for me, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm not somebody who grew up on all of these characters, so they're also relatively new for me. So just to my own perspective was just this is a great patriot, and this is somebody who was going to do anything at any cost, and truly believed that he was going to be victorious, but clearly was not. But I also, I enjoyed the character. I enjoyed the snide sort of remarks on the side, and I had a great time doing it.
I grew up on Air Force bases watching planes take off, and I was wanting to be Hal Jordan, so you did a great job, man.
Thanks, pal. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I was interested in the balls aspect. You'd missed that, didn't you?
Big, very big, yeah.
All right, last question. I'm going to the guy in the back of the room.
Hi, my name is Malcolm. I'm a YouTuber. I have a question for Sasha, which is an off-base question,
Okay.
which is not related to SupermanRedSon, if that's okay. So Sasha, what was it like performing an incredible cast with the show Grimm, which none of you basic bitches saw.
Did you just throw shade at the whole room?
It was the greatest.
I mean, I don't want to hog up the stage talking about Grimm, but thank you very much for your support. And, I had a great time. It was 6 wonderful years, and I'm grateful for fans like yourself who watch it and support it. So thank you.
All right. One more, not from a YouTuber. Right here in the front.
My name's Sarah. You guys touched a little bit on the politics, but I just am wondering how you feel about people who say politics should stay out of superhero stories. I'm not one of those people, but my brothers are, and I so.
Just tell them they're wrong. Simple as that.
Well, my basic thing is I always felt like, as a kid, like superheroes were supposed to inspire. I think that superheroes are like modern mythology. And I think that, I mean, it's a different company, but like Stan Lee, I think that he championed a lot of things about racism, sexism, and inclusion, and so I think absolutely superheroes should be about doing what's right, about a higher ground. So that's my opinion.
All right, when we're done, I'm going to need Ilya, Tim, Nick, and Sarah to meet me over here. And in the meantime, I want to say thank you to all for coming. Don't forget to run out. You don't have to go out. You can do it tonight. You can do it right now. Pick up your phone. Buy the film on digital. Tell all your friends. Keep tweeting. Keep Instagramming. Hashtag SupermanRedSon. Available on Blu-ray and 4K on. Very good. I want you to say thank you to Sasha Roiz, Roger Craig Smith, Diedrich Bader, Amy Acker, Jason Isaacs, Vanessa Marshall, Travis Willingham, Sam Lou, and Bruce Timm. Thanks to everybody here. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks to Gary. What about one for Gary?
Gary.
Yeah.